I was lying on the cold floor, the pain in my hip making it hard to breathe. My wheelchair had been thrown aside. My son, David, stood over me, his chest rising and falling with rage, shouting that I was useless, that I was a burden, that I should have died like his father. I couldn't even move. My legs had stopped working after the stroke, and my arms were too weak to fight back. I just cried, covering my face as his foot struck my side. Again and again. "You can't even wipe yourself," he screamed, slamming the door as he left me in the darkness. I stayed on that floor until the sun came up. My body was sore, but my heart hurt more. That was my son, my only child. I raised him with love. I gave him everything. And now he was hurting me because I could no longer walk. 'Cause I was disabled. Tears slid down my cheeks as I whispered, "God, help me. Please, save me before he kills me." But then, just as I felt the breath leave my lungs, I heard the front door creak open again. I never thought I'd end up like this. But let me take you back to how everything began. My name is Maria. I was born in a small village and grew up dreaming of having a happy family. I met my husband, Samuel, when I was just 18. He was gentle, strong, and had the warmest smile. We married the next year, and when David was born, it felt like the world stood still for me. He was my whole world. We didn't have much, but we had love. Samuel worked hard as a carpenter, and I helped sell fruits at the market. Life was simple, and our son grew up surrounded by our love. We prayed together, ate together, laughed together. David was such a sweet boy. He would always bring me wildflowers and call me his queen. I never imagined he could change into someone I couldn't even recognize. Everything started to shift after Samuel died in a road accident. David was only 16, and I tried to stay strong for both of us. I worked extra hours, even started sewing for neighbors. But it was hard. And David, he changed. He started hanging out with older boys, skipping school, and yelling whenever I tried to correct him. "Why did Dad have to die?" he would shout. "Why didn't God take you instead?" That hurt more than anything. But I told myself he was just grieving. Years passed, and David barely finished school. He refused to work. Instead, he would demand money from me, and when I didn't have enough, he'd throw things, break furniture, and scream at me. I still believed he would change. Kept praying. Kept hoping. Then, 5 years ago, I had a stroke. I remember waking up in the hospital, unable to move my legs, my right hand numb. The doctor said the stroke had damaged part of my spine and muscles. I would never walk again. I was broken. David didn't visit me for 3 days. When he finally did, he looked angry. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked, standing at the edge of the bed. "I can't be a nurse. You're just going to lie there like a bag of bones." Cried that night. Not because of the stroke, but because my son didn't care that I was suffering. When they discharged me, I had no choice but to go home. I had no other family. No sisters. No brothers. Just David. First he tried. He helped me use the bathroom and cooked sometimes. But he grew colder with each passing day. He would yell whenever I called his name. He hated helping me dress or feeding me. Soon he stopped entirely. Sometimes I would go hungry until a neighbor checked in on me. Other times, David would only drop bread beside me and say, "That's all you get today." I felt invisible. Trapped. Like a ghost in my own home. One evening, I fell from my wheelchair while trying to reach a glass of water. I cried out, hoping David would hear. He came into the room with a disgusted look. "Are you serious?" he muttered. "Do you enjoy making me miserable?" He didn't help me up. Instead, he stepped over me and went to his room. I lay there all night. Got worse. David started bringing strange people into the house. Loud music, drinking, even smoking. One night, a man stepped into my room while I was asleep, drunk and laughing. I screamed, and David dragged him out, but only after calling me names and saying I was ruining his fun. Sometimes he would hit me just because I asked for help. "You're not a queen anymore, Mom. You're just an old, broken woman." I began to believe it. I stopped praying. I stopped smiling. I waited for death. But one night something happened. I was lying in bed, tears soaking my pillow, my ribs sore from another beating. I whispered a prayer I hadn't said in a long time. God, if you still hear me, please. Please save me from my own son. And that very night something shook the house. There was a loud bang from outside. Then screams. Sirens. David rushed out of the house. I tried to pull myself to the edge of the bed, panic crawling through my chest. What was going on? Was this the answer to my prayer? But before I could find out, the door burst open, and someone I never expected to see walked in. Maria! A soft voice called from the doorway. I turned my head slowly. My heart skipped. It was Rosa, my childhood friend. I hadn't seen her in nearly 10 years. She looked older with streaks of silver in her black hair and tired eyes, but her spirit was the same. Kind, strong, full of light. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I was passing by and saw the smoke. David's car caught fire outside, she said, rushing to my side. Are you okay? What happened to you? I couldn't stop the tears from falling. My lips trembled as I tried to answer, but the words didn't come. Then she saw the bruises, the marks on my face, the broken wheelchair in the corner. Her hands flew to her mouth and she let out a gasp. Maria, who did this to you? I turned my face away, ashamed. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to speak those ugly words out loud. My son, I finally whispered. Rosa sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers gently holding mine. She didn't say anything at first. Just sat there in silence, her warm hand gripping my trembling one. After a long pause, she said, You're coming with me. Tonight. No, I replied quickly. He'll get angry. He'll come for me. No, Maria. You're not staying one more night in this house. I won't let him hurt you again. For a moment, I imagined what it would be like to escape. To live in peace. To be free from David's fists and cruel words. But then I thought of how angry he would be if he returned and found me gone. He's my son, I said. Rosa shook her head. No child has the right to abuse their mother. You need help. And I'm going to make sure you get it. At that moment, the door flung open again. David stood there, eyes wide, breathing fast. What's going on? He barked, looking between us. Why are you here, Rosa? I came because I saw the fire, she said, standing up slowly. And I saw your mother bruised, starving, broken. David scoffed and rolled his eyes. She likes to exaggerate. She falls down all the time. She's old. Rosa stepped closer to him, not scared one bit. That doesn't explain the broken wheelchair or the marks on her face. Get out of my house, David hissed. Rosa didn't budge. Not without her. David clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing. She's not going anywhere. I froze, fear crawling up my spine. His tone was dangerous. I had seen that look before, the one that came right before he lashed out. But Rosa wasn't afraid. She pulled out her phone. I already called the police. They're on their way. David's face twisted in rage. You what? I braced myself for what would happen next. I thought he would hit her, or worse. But before he could move, flashing lights poured into the room through the window. A voice shouted from outside. This is the police. Open up. David cursed under his breath and stormed out of the room. Within minutes, 2 officers were in the house, one standing between David and Rosa, while the other came to my bedside. Ma'am, are you okay? The officer asked. I nodded, unable to speak. Rosa answered for me, telling them everything. How she found me, the bruises, the neglect, the fear. They took photos. They helped lift me gently into a new wheelchair Rosa had brought from her car. David stood in the corner, fists clenched, eyes burning with hate. As they wheeled me out of the house, David shouted behind us. You'll regret this, Mom. You hear me? I'm your only family. No one else wants you. His words pierced my heart like a knife. But Rosa whispered in my ear. He's wrong. I want you. You're not alone. Outside, the cool night air brushed against my face. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Rosa helped me into her car and promised that I could stay with her as long as I needed. I looked back at the house I had lived in for decades. No longer felt like home. Felt like a prison. A cage that my own son had locked me inside. That night, Rosa made me a hot meal. Soup, soft bread, and a warm blanket. She bathed me gently, washed my hair, and tucked me into bed like a child. I cried myself to sleep. Not from pain but from relief. The next few days were quiet, peaceful. She took me to the clinic, where a nurse helped clean my wounds and gave me medicine. I was given a proper wheelchair. Rosa even called a church nearby to ask if someone could visit and pray with me. I began to feel like a human being again. But the scars on my heart, they weren't healing as fast. One morning, Rosa handed me a piece of paper. It was a legal document. "What's this?" I asked. "It's to file a restraining order against David," she explained. "The police recommended it. It will protect you." My hand shook. "But he's my son. And you're his mother," she said gently. "But he stopped acting like your son long ago." I stared at the paper for a long time. I wanted to sign it. I needed to. But the love I had for David still lingered in my chest like a ghost. That same afternoon, while Rosa went out to buy groceries, the doorbell rang. I waited. Maybe she forgot something. Then the bell rang again. Longer. Louder. Curious and slightly nervous, I wheeled myself to the front window and peeked through the curtain. My heart dropped. It was David. He was standing on the porch, fists clenched, his eyes wild. "Mom," he shouted. "Open the door. I know you're in there." Panic. I tried to reach the phone, but it had fallen from the side table. I tried to grab it, but my weak hands trembled too much. David banged the door louder. "You're gonna pay for betraying me." I was trapped. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I backed away slowly, whispering over and over, "God, please, help me." Suddenly, the window shattered. Glass flew into the room as David shoved his arm through, trying to unlock the door from the inside. He was coming for me. And this time, I feared he would finish what he started. I screamed as loud as my lungs allowed. David's hand reached through the broken window, fumbling for the lock. My body shook so hard I thought I would faint. I tried to wheel myself away, but my hands slipped off the wheels. I was frozen. Trapped. Just then I heard screeching tires outside. "Get away from her." Rosa's voice thundered from the porch. She ran up, grocery bags falling to the ground as she rushed toward the door. David saw her and growled like a wild dog. "Mind your business, Rosa." "This is my business," she shouted. "You've hurt her enough." He slammed his fists against the door. "She's my mother. You think you can take her away from me? I'm not taking her away." Rosa yelled back. "You already lost her the day you chose hate over love." That's when Rosa pulled out her phone. "I've called the police again. You better run before they drag you away." David stared at her, chest heaving, eyes burning with anger. Then, without another word, he stepped off the porch and disappeared into the street like smoke in the wind. Rosa rushed inside and hugged me tight. "It's okay now, Maria. He's gone." But I couldn't stop shaking. He had come for me. And he was not finished. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the walls, every sound of a car outside, I thought it was David coming back. Rosa stayed up with me, holding my hand, praying softly into the night. But fear had built a home in my bones. The next morning, Rosa called the police again and filed an official report. She also called the church and spoke with a kind pastor named Brother Joel. He came to visit that evening. He sat by my side and said, "Maria, I don't know why your son turned out this way. But God never promised we wouldn't suffer. He promised he would never leave us in our suffering." His words warmed my heart. Then he reached into his bag and handed me a small Bible. "I want you to read the Psalms. When the fear becomes too big, let these words remind you that God is still near." I clutched the Bible to my chest and nodded. Thank you. For the next few days I tried to heal. Rosa cooked for me, played music, even braided my hair like she used to when we were girls. Slowly, the laughter returned to my lips. But deep inside something still hurt. Something more than David's abuse. It was the question no one could answer: why? Why had my son turned into someone who hated me? One morning, as Rosa was out again, I stared at an old photo album she had found among my things. It was filled with pictures. Baby David wrapped in a blue blanket, David playing with his father, David wearing his first school uniform. Tears ran down my cheeks. He had been so full of joy, so full of promise. When did that light go out? I remembered the day Samuel died. That car crash shattered more than just metal and bones. It shattered our family. David was never the same. And maybe I wasn't either. I tried to be strong. But maybe in my pain I forgot to see his. That thought stayed with me all day. That evening, as Rosa was preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. This time it wasn't David. It was a woman named Angela, social worker. Rosa had contacted her in case I wanted to press charges or seek shelter in a protected home. Angela was gentle. She spoke kindly, with eyes that reminded me of my mother's. "You've suffered so much, Maria," she said. "But you don't have to carry this alone. We can help. You can live somewhere safe with nurses and others like you. You'll never have to see your son again if you don't want to." Her words were comforting, but my heart felt heavy. "I still love him," I whispered. She nodded. "I know. Most mothers do. Even when their children break their hearts." That night I didn't sleep. Prayed instead. 4 hours. I opened the Bible Brother Joel gave me and read the words of Psalm 34. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Cried and cried. "God, what do I do?" I whispered. And as I prayed, I felt something deep stir in me. Not anger, not fear, but a strange, quiet strength. I wasn't weak. I wasn't alone. I was a mother. And I would rise again. The next morning, I asked Rosa to help me write a letter. A letter to David. I poured out my heart. "Dear David, you are my son. My only son. I gave birth to you in pain, and I raised you with love. I held your hand when you were sick, sang to you when you cried, and stood by you when your father died. I loved you even when you yelled. I loved you even when you hurt me. But I am also a woman, human being, and I deserve love and respect, not fear and pain. I forgive you, David, but I cannot live with you. Not until you are ready to change. Not until you are ready to be a son again. I pray for you every night. I still believe there is good in you. Please find it. Your mother, Maria." Rosa helped me send the letter to his last known address. I didn't expect a reply. But days later the doorbell rang again. Rosa opened it cautiously and gasped. It was David. But not the David I remembered. This time he looked tired. Skinny. His clothes were dirty and his eyes were red like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't try to come inside. He stood on the porch, hands in his pockets. I got your letter," he said, eyes cast to the floor. Rosa stepped aside and looked to me. He nodded. "Let him in." David walked slowly into the house, his steps unsure. He looked at me in the wheelchair and flinched. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said. Silence. He fell to his knees. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't. I treated you like trash. I blamed you for everything. I let my anger eat me alive. And I took it out on you." I stared at him for a long time. Then, with all the strength I had, I reached out and touched his hand. "I forgive you," I said. Tears poured from his eyes. He buried his face in my lap and sobbed like a child. It was the first time I'd seen my son again in years. The real David. But as he cried, the front door flew open, and behind him stood 2 angry men. "David!" one of them barked. "You owe us money, remember? You thought hiding with Mommy would save you." David turned pale. Froze. They stepped into the house, fists clenched. And just like that, My son's past came crashing through my doorpoint. One of the men grabbed David by the shirt and shoved him hard against the wall. The second man, taller and mean-looking, scanned the room and sneered when he saw me in my wheelchair. "So this is the old woman you ran to," he said with a laugh. "You really thought we wouldn't find you here, David? Please," David begged, hands raised. "Just give me more time. I'll get the money, I swear." The man tightened his grip. "You've been saying that for months. No more chances. You either pay now, or we take something you love." My heart dropped. Rosa stood frozen near the kitchen, her eyes darting around for something. Anything to protect us. But we were outnumbered. And I was powerless. David looked at me with terror in his eyes. "Don't touch her. She has nothing to do with this." The man gave a cruel grin. "She does now." The other man reached for me. "Don't you dare!" Rosa screamed, grabbing a hot kettle from the stove. Without hesitation, she threw the steaming water at the man. He howled in pain, clutching his face as he fell backward. David broke free from the other man's grip and rushed toward me. "Mom, we have to get out of here." The second man, furious, pulled out a small knife from his jacket. "Enough games," he growled. Rosa grabbed a broom and stood between us and the man. Her hands shaking but her voice firm. "You'll have to go through me first." He moved toward her, but before he could strike, flashing red and blue lights lit up the windows. Police sirens. They'd come. Again. The man cursed and ran for the back door, dragging his screaming friend with him. In moments they were gone. Rosa collapsed onto the couch, gasping for air. David dropped to the floor beside me, his body trembling. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to bring danger to you, again." The officers entered moments later, weapons drawn, and Rosa quickly explained everything. One officer called for an ambulance for the injured man outside, while the others took our statements. David didn't hide anything this time. He confessed to the gambling, the debts, the drinking. All of it. "I messed everything up," he said. "My whole life. And I dragged my own mother into it." The officer took his statement, then looked at me. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges against your son?" Everyone fell silent. I looked at David, broken, scared but finally honest. The boy I once held in my arms was still somewhere in there. He was just lost. "No," I said. "He needs help. Not prison." The officers nodded and told David he'd need to appear in court for the illegal activities. Then they left and peace returned, for a moment. Later that night, Rosa sat with me while David remained in the guest room, too ashamed to eat or speak. "I don't know what to do," I confessed to her. "I prayed for a miracle, and he came back. But now I see just how far gone he really is." Rosa took my hand. "Sometimes miracles don't come fixed. They come broken, so you can help God put the pieces back together." Her words stuck in my heart. The next morning, David knocked softly on my door. His eyes were swollen from crying, his voice hoarse. "I want to change," he said. "I don't want to be that person anymore. Can you help me?" I stared at him, unsure of what to say. "You want me to help you?" "Yes." He nodded. "I know I don't deserve it. But I can't do it alone." I felt something in my soul shift. Second chance. Not just for him but for me too. "Okay," I said. "But this won't be easy." He knelt down beside my wheelchair. "I don't want easy. I want real." That day we made a plan. David would join a rehab group through the church. Rosa found a counselor willing to speak with him. And for the first time I saw a flicker of light in his eyes, like the old David was beginning to wake up. Weeks passed and slowly, the house began to feel warm again. David started helping Rosa cook. He began fixing things around the house. He even read the Bible to me in the evenings. One night, after reading a story about forgiveness, he looked up and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled and touched his hand. "You were never too far for me to love." But healing isn't always a straight road. One evening I overheard a phone call. David was in the hallway, whispering, "I told you I'm done. Don't call me again. Oz. I don't care what you say. I'm not giving you anything." Another pause. "If you come near my mother again, I swear." He slammed the phone down, breathing heavily. I wheeled out into the hallway. "Who was that?" He hesitated, then looked at me, guilt in his eyes. "One of the men. They're still trying to find me." My heart sank. "David, I'm not going back to that life," he said quickly. "But they're angry. And I'm scared." That night I couldn't sleep. Had I made a mistake? Had I let someone back into my life who would only bring more danger? Around 2 a.m. I prayed again. "Lord, I gave birth to him. I forgave him. But I don't know if I can survive him." As I closed my eyes, a single thought echoed in my heart. Help him fight. The next morning I asked David to sit with me. "If you really want to change," I said, "we have to finish what we started. You can't run from your past. You have to face it." He looked unsure. "How?" "We'll go to the police. Tell them everything. Let them protect you. You can't live in fear." He sat quietly, thinking. Then he nodded. "Okay. Let's do it." So we went. David confessed everything, from the debts to the gangs to the threats. The police agreed to place him in a protective program if he testified. And he did. Days turned into weeks. And David began to blossom. He joined church services. He volunteered with other recovering addicts. He even helped fix up Rosa's garage and offered to mow neighbors' lawns for free. People started seeing him differently. So did I. But just when I thought peace had finally arrived, one night, as we gathered for dinner, the phone rang. Rosa answered it. Her face went pale. She handed me the phone with trembling hands. "Hello," said. A deep voice answered, low and cold. "You thought hiding behind the church would save him. He'll pay. And so will you." The line went dead. I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. David stood frozen. They had found us again. And this time, they weren't bluffing. The phone slipped from my hand and crashed to the floor, but I barely noticed. My heart thumped in my chest so loudly I thought it might explode. The voice still echoed in my ears. Cold, certain, dangerous. David stood frozen. His face pale like he'd seen a ghost. "Mom, what did they say?" I couldn't speak. My lips moved, but no words came out. Rosa rushed to my side and held my trembling hands. "What's going on?" she asked. I turned to David slowly. "They know where we are. They said you'll pay. And so will I." He cursed under his breath and started pacing the living room, running his hands through his hair. "This is my fault," he muttered. "I should have never come back. I should have disappeared. I grabbed his hand and squeezed it. "Stop. You made a choice to change. You did the right thing. Evil doesn't like light. It will always try to fight back." He looked down at me, tears forming in his eyes. "But I brought this danger to you. Again." Rosa took charge. "We're calling the police right now." She picked up the phone and dialed quickly. The officers arrived within 15 minutes, asking for every detail. They recorded the threat and said they'd increase patrol in the area. But fear had already built a home in our hearts again. That night no one slept. David sat by the window with a kitchen knife in hand, watching. Rosa dozed off in the armchair beside me, her Bible open on her lap. I stared at the ceiling, praying silently. "God, please. If you've started a work in David, don't let it be destroyed. Cover us. Hide us under your wings." Morning came, but peace didn't. The police offered to move us temporarily to a safe house, but I refused. "No," I said. "I've run long enough. I won't be a prisoner anymore. If they want to scare me, they'll have to fight the Spirit of God in me." David sat beside me, overwhelmed. "I don't want to lose you, Mom. Not again. You already lost me once when you turned into someone I didn't know," I said softly. "Now I have my son back. And I won't let the devil take you again." That day we installed cameras, new locks, and reinforced the back door. Rosa called church members, and soon we had a group of people helping us guard the house. Even Brother Joel showed up with other men who volunteered to pray and keep watch. That evening we held hands and prayed in a circle. There was no fear in the room, only fire. Holy fire. David wept openly, repenting before them all. "I've sinned. I've done terrible things," he said. "But I'm not that man anymore. I want to live right. And I want to protect my mother, the woman I should have honored from the beginning." The entire room was silent as Rosa stepped forward and hugged him tight. "We believe in you," she said. That night I finally slept. It was deep, peaceful, healing sleep. But it didn't last. At exactly 2:33 a.m., the alarm system went off. A shrill, piercing sound that sent chills down my spine. David bolted from his room, knife in hand. Rosa grabbed her phone and called the police. I couldn't move fast enough, but I heard the sound of glass shattering in the back of the house. "They're inside," Rosa cried. David rushed toward the noise and I screamed his name. "David!" "No!" I heard a scuffle. Heavy breathing. The sound of fists and grunts. I struggled to get out of bed, wheeled myself toward the hallway with all my strength. Then I heard a gunshot. My heart stopped. "David!" I screamed. Rosa screamed too. I reached the hallway and saw the front door burst open as 2 police officers stormed in with weapons drawn. "Drop it! Hands up!" one officer shouted. I turned the corner and saw a man on the floor, one of the thugs, blood pooling from his shoulder. David stood above him, breathing hard, holding a metal rod. His hand trembled, his shirt torn. "I didn't shoot," he gasped. "It wasn't me." The second man had fled. The shot had come from him, but he missed. By God's mercy, no one was hit. The police cuffed the injured man and radioed for an ambulance. The house was filled with chaos, lights, shouting, questions. I looked at David, whose body had finally collapsed to the floor in exhaustion. He looked at me and whispered, "I didn't run this time, Mom. I stayed. I protected you." I wheeled to him and took his face in my hands. "And I'm proud of you. You're becoming the man I always prayed for." The officers told us the man they caught had confessed everything. The threats, the debt, the plan to kidnap David for ransom. But now with this arrest and David's testimony, they had enough evidence to track down the others and protect us for good. The danger was not fully gone, but the worst storm had passed. Days later we were granted full police protection. The church community continued to rally around us. David kept attending counseling and support meetings. He even started speaking at local groups about the dangers of gambling and violence. He told his story to teens at the church. "Don't wait until you break your mother's heart before you change. Don't waste your life the way I almost did." And then, the most shocking day came. David knelt beside me, held my hands gently and said, "Mom, I want to take care of you now. You don't have to worry about anything again. Found a job. It's not much, but I'll do whatever it takes to give you peace." I stared at him, barely believing the transformation. He kissed my hand and said, "This time you raised me again. From the ashes." I couldn't hold my tears. "You're my miracle, David. And I'll never stop thanking God." But just as I began to smile, a letter arrived in the mail. Rosa opened it and her eyes widened. "It's from the court," she said slowly. She handed it to me. I read the words carefully. David must appear in court for past charges related to gang involvement, drug activity, and unpaid fines. A sentence may be applied. My hands began to tremble. He might go to prison, after all this. I looked at David. His face went blank. He had fought so hard to change. Now, he might lose his freedom again. The next morning I woke up to the sound of loud banging on my door. My heart jumped. I looked around, confused and scared. I thought it was David again, maybe angry that I had been quiet all night. But when I looked out the window I saw something different. 2 women stood outside with plastic bowls and bags. They were from the local church, and they had come with food and clothes. "Good morning, Mama Maria," one of them said gently when I opened the door. "We heard what happened. Someone told us about your condition, and we just wanted to help." I couldn't hold back the tears. Help. For me. After everything. They walked in, cleaned up my room and helped me bathe. They even helped me put on a clean dress. For the first time in weeks I felt human again. They prayed with me, and when they were done, one of them asked, "Do you want to come to church with us on Sunday? We can carry you in our van." He nodded. I didn't even think before answering. Deep inside I wanted something more than just food and clothes. I wanted hope. That Sunday they returned, lifted me gently, and took me to church. The choir sang beautifully, and I sat in the front row with tears running down my cheeks the entire time. I couldn't explain what I felt. I just knew something was changing. I felt warmth inside me, like a light trying to grow inside all the darkness. The pastor spoke about forgiveness. "Even those who hurt you the most, pray for them," he said. "Let God fight your battle." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about it. David didn't deserve my forgiveness. But maybe, just maybe, I needed peace. I knelt beside my bed and prayed with tears in my eyes. "God," I whispered, "I'm tired. I have nothing left. If you don't help me, I will die in this house. Please touch David's heart or take him away. I can't take it anymore." 2 days later, David came home, drunk and shouting again. But this time something was different. He wasn't angry. He was crying. "Mama," he said, falling to his knees. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm so sorry. I've been horrible." I stared at him, frozen. "Please," he begged, holding my hand. "I lost my job. I've been drinking. I don't know how to be a son anymore." It was like he was possessed by pain. For a moment, I saw my little boy again. The one who used to bring me flowers and smile when I gave him sweets. I didn't know what to say. I didn't trust his words. But I didn't push him away either. That night he didn't shout. He didn't hit. He even helped me to the bathroom and made me tea. I didn't believe it was real. I stayed awake all night, waiting for it to turn back into a nightmare. But then, it did. 3 days later I heard his voice again, this time angry and loud. I had used his toothpaste without asking. That's all it took. He rushed into my room, pulled me from the bed, and shouted right in my face. "You think I'm your servant? You think you can just do whatever you want?" He threw the toothpaste across the room and slammed the door. I fell onto the cold floor, shaking, too scared to cry. My hope shattered again. That tiny light I thought I had found. He didn't help me get up. He didn't care. For the next week he left me lying there. No food. No water. No one came. I was crawling with pain, praying louder than ever before. I began to scream prayers into the air. "God, is this what I deserve? After raising him? After everything?" And then, one night I heard something. Knock. Not from the front door. But from the window. Tap tap tap. I turned my head slowly. Who was it? "Maria." A soft voice called. My heart stopped. It was David's childhood friend, Carlos. I hadn't seen him in years. What was he doing at the window? "I heard from someone in the market," he said through the glass. "They say David's gone crazy. Are you okay?" I managed to whisper, "No." Carlos pushed the window open, crawled inside, and gasped when he saw me on the floor. "What has he done to you?" he said, picking me up gently. "My God." He wrapped me in a blanket, gave me water from his bag and cried, "I'm taking you out of here." That's when I heard the key in the front door. David was home. And he wasn't alone. He had brought someone with him. Someone who sounded angry too. Carlos turned to me. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "I'll hide." But it was too late. David walked in and saw us. His face turned red. "What is this?" he shouted. "Who is this man?" He rushed forward, grabbed Carlos by the shirt and pulled him back. Carlos stood his ground, but David wasn't listening. You think you can sneak into my house and touch my mother? He raised his hand to hit Carlos. He screamed, "Stop, David!" But he didn't stop. He punched Carlos. Blood splattered across the wall. Carlos stumbled backward, crashing into the chair. David rushed to me, grabbed my arm and shouted, "You betrayed me, Mama. You brought someone to spy on me." My arm twisted in pain. Then, in a moment that froze time, Carlos stood up, wiped the blood from his mouth and said, "You're not a man, David. You're a monster." David turned to punch him again. But then the front door burst open. David stood by the doorway, his face dark and unreadable. "You think you can run this house now?" he hissed, gripping the doorframe so hard that his knuckles turned white. Maria had just asked him not to bring strangers into the house at night again. She was tired, her body ached, and the noise had kept her from sleeping. That simple request sent him into a rage. "You're nothing without me," he roared, storming across the room. His hand swung out and struck her on the shoulder, sending pain shooting through her arm. "You're just a cripple sitting there waiting to die." Maria's wheelchair wobbled, but she grabbed the sides to steady herself. She refused to fall, not this time. "You used to be my son," she whispered through tears. "But now I don't know who you are anymore." David turned away sharply and stormed out of the room, but not before kicking over a small table. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house. Maria sat there in silence, her chest heaving with sobs, her spirit breaking again. That night the house was silent. Even the insects outside seemed to stop chirping. Maria stayed up, staring at the wall. Her thoughts were heavy, but her heart was full of one thing: prayer. She folded her trembling hands and began to speak to God again, her voice shaking. "Lord, I don't know how much more I can take, but I know you are watching. If you don't do something soon, I might not survive this." Her prayer didn't fix everything in that moment, but something inside her shifted. A spark of courage returned. The next day, she made a decision that shocked even her. She told David she wanted to go to church. He laughed. "You, in that chair. What for? You gonna pray the pain away?" She looked at him directly, for the first time in weeks. "Yes," she said calmly. "Because you clearly won't stop hurting me." He frowned, unsure how to respond to that. He grumbled and walked off, but for some reason he didn't stop her. That Sunday, Maria dressed in her cleanest dress. A neighbor helped her into her wheelchair and took her to the small church down the street. The moment she entered the building, people turned to look at her, some with pity, some with shock. But one woman, Sister Teresa, came rushing over. "Maria! Oh my goodness, it's been years!" she cried, wrapping her arms around her. "What happened?" Maria smiled faintly. "A lot. But I'm still here." That service changed something in her. When the choir sang, she cried softly. When the pastor spoke about forgiveness and strength, she felt as if every word was meant for her. And when it was time to pray, Maria didn't just ask God for help. She thanked him for keeping her alive long enough to return. From then on, she went to church every Sunday. Even if David didn't approve, even if she had to crawl out of bed herself, she went. It became her place of refuge. Her healing began slowly. But that healing seemed to provoke David more. One day, Maria returned home from service to find the house completely turned upside down. Clothes ripped from drawers, dishes shattered on the floor, her Bible torn apart. "You think praying is gonna stop me?" David yelled, standing in the middle of the mess. "Every time you leave this house, I lose control of you. And I don't like that." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. She quietly wheeled over to her torn Bible and began picking up the pieces, her fingers trembling. "Say something," David shouted. She looked up at him and said, "You need help, David. And until you get it, I will pray for you. But you won't stop me." He stormed out again, slamming the door so hard the wall shook. That night, Maria cried like she hadn't cried in years. But not because of fear. This time it was grief for her son who had become a stranger. The very next morning, things reached a dangerous peak. Maria was cooking porridge when David entered the kitchen. His eyes were bloodshot. He hadn't slept. He looked wild. "Give me your bank card," he barked. Maria looked at him calmly. "I don't have any money left, David. You've taken it all." He grabbed her by the wrist and squeezed. "You're lying. You're saving it. You want to run away." She winced in pain but didn't scream. "I'm not lying. I have nothing left." Suddenly, he pulled open a drawer and grabbed the small kitchen knife. He pointed it at her. "If you don't give me the card, I swear I'll." Just then, someone knocked hard on the door. David froze. The knock came again, louder this time. "David, open the door. This is the police." Maria gasped. Who had called them? Was this really happening? David stood still, the knife still in his hand. The knock came again, followed by voices shouting, "Police! Open the door or we're coming in." David dropped the knife. Maria sat frozen in her chair, her eyes wide with disbelief. Had her prayers finally been answered? I could barely believe what I was hearing. Maria had just told me that David planned to sell the house, the only home I had known for over 30 years. My hands trembled as I held the corner of my bedsheet. It wasn't just about the house. It was about everything. My life, my memories, and the only place I felt safe even with all the abuse I had suffered. Now he wanted to throw me out like trash. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Why would he do that? I whispered. Maria wiped her tears and said, "He told a real estate agent that you were becoming a burden, that selling the house and putting you in a nursing home would make things easier. He said you're holding him back." That night I didn't sleep. My heart pounded so hard that I thought it might burst. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about my son, the same boy I carried for 9 months, fed from my breast, taught how to walk, and cried for when he was sick. How did we get here? The next morning I made a decision. I told Maria, "Take me to the church. I need to pray." She nodded. "I'll go get the wheelchair." When we arrived at the church, the air felt heavy. The building was old, but the silence inside was strong. I sat before the altar. There was no priest, no music, no people. Just me and God. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "God, please. I don't have strength anymore. But you do. Show me what to do. Save me. Save David." For over an hour I cried, prayed, and begged. I told God everything. The pain, the beatings, the insults, the loneliness. I asked him for a miracle, not just to save me, but to touch my son's heart. When Maria wheeled me out, the sky had changed. It was no longer cloudy. The sun was peeking through like a sign. I felt a small fire inside of me that I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew God had heard me. 3 days later, the unexpected happened. David came home drunk again, storming through the door. "Where's that old woman?" he shouted. "Maria, you think I don't know you've been spying on me?" Maria stood in the hallway. "You need help, David," she said calmly. He marched up to her, raised his hand, and slapped her so hard she hit the wall. I screamed from my room, but I couldn't move. I was too weak. He walked into my room and grabbed the edge of my blanket. "You think this is your palace? You don't own anything anymore. Soon this house will be gone. And you'll rot in some dirty home with other old fools." I was terrified, but just as he turned to leave, someone banged on the front door. It was the police. David froze. Maria, with one swollen cheek, had pressed the emergency button on her phone before he hit her. 2 officers burst inside and grabbed David by the arm. "What is this? Let me go," he yelled. "You're under arrest for assault," one of the officers said. "We've also received reports of elder abuse." My mouth fell open. I hadn't expected things to move this quickly. As they dragged David out, he screamed my name. "Mama! Mama, please. Don't let them take me." I turned my face away. It was the first time I didn't feel guilty for his suffering. That night everything was quiet. Maria and I sat together in the living room. She held my hand and whispered, "That prayer you made. I think it worked." I nodded slowly. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. Because the next morning we got a letter that shook my soul again. David had hired a lawyer, and he was suing me. For the house. David stood in the doorway, staring at the room that had once been his prison. It was the same room he had locked his mother in for weeks. The same room he had thrown her food like she was an animal. The guilt in his eyes was heavy, too heavy to carry. Maria sat in her wheelchair in the living room, praying quietly, her face full of peace, not pain. She had forgiven him. But David had not forgiven himself. "I can't sleep, Mama," he said one night, sitting beside her. "Every time I close my eyes I see you crying, crawling, calling out my name." Maria gently touched his hand. "You were blind, son. But now you see. That's all that matters." David shook his head. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Maria looked at him softly. "Maybe not. But I gave it anyway." Still, the storm was not over. A few days later, a loud knock came at the door. David opened it and found 2 police officers standing there. "Are you David?" one asked. "Yes," he said. "You're under arrest for the abuse and neglect of your mother, Maria." Maria wheeled over quickly. No, please. I'm fine now." He changed. The officers looked at her sadly. "We're sorry, ma'am. But this is based on a neighbor's report and hospital records. The law has to take its course." Maria cried as they handcuffed David. He didn't resist. "Mama, don't cry. Maybe this is my punishment. Maybe I need to go through this, like you did." Maria wept. "David, please." But David smiled through his tears. "I'll be okay." He was taken away, and Maria sat in silence, the house suddenly feeling too big and too empty. She went to her prayer room and sat quietly. She closed her eyes and whispered, "God, I don't understand. But I trust you." Weeks passed, then months. Maria visited David in prison every Sunday. She brought him books, wrote him letters, prayed with him through the glass. Each time he looked healthier, calmer, more focused. "I've started teaching Bible lessons to other inmates," David said one day. "Mama, your prayers changed me. They healed me from the inside." Maria smiled. "I knew God had a plan for you." Then came the surprise. One morning, Maria received a call from the warden. "Mrs. Maria, your son is being considered for early release due to good behavior. He's helped many others here. He's different now." Maria's heart leaped with joy. "Thank you, God." On the day of David's release, Maria waited outside the prison in her wheelchair. The gates opened, and there he was, strong, clean, no longer full of hate or pain. He ran to her and hugged her tightly. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, son." They returned home together, and this time it was not a house of tears, but of healing. David became a counselor at a center that helped people dealing with anger and trauma. Maria joined a prayer group that supported mothers with struggling children. Together they told their story, not to shame David, but to show the power of prayer, forgiveness, and change. Maria sat in her garden one evening, watching the sun go down. A neighbor walked up to her. "I heard your story, Maria. I'm sorry for everything you went through." Maria smiled. "It's okay," she said gently. "My story didn't end with pain. It ended with a miracle. And that's what matters." Life lesson. No one is too broken to be fixed. Forgiveness doesn't make the pain go away immediately, but it opens the door for healing. Even the worst people can change. Sometimes all it takes is a prayer and a little bit of love. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with someone who might need this message of hope. We have more true life grandma stories coming your way. Stories that will make you cry, reflect, and believe again in miracles. Subscribe now and join the family of faith, hope, and healing.